combining that hands-on experience with giving people data and insights to drive the advice that we're giving and help people understand their dog better is really where we're moving into. And that's where AI has been like a real game changer for us in the direction we're heading.
My name's Sabrina Ramanov. Super excited today to be speaking with Brian Burton, who's the co-founder and co-CEO of Instinct Dog Behavior and Training, which he scaled to 7.5 million in annual revenue with 12 locations across the US. So super excited to dive in today, especially because I have 2 puppies myself. I would love to hear real quick, Brian, how did you get into this company and how do you guys use AI today to help with Instinct Dog Behavior and Training?
I started the company with my wife, Sarah Fraser. We decided to start Instinct. Sarah had been volunteering at rescue groups and shelters for years, and I was actually bit in the face as a kid. I was terrified of dogs.
Oh my gosh,
I had a pretty
wow.
bad bite. I honestly wasn't super comfortable around dogs. And I met Sarah, who had always volunteered. And it was interesting because I was like, I kind of want to get over this, and just started to volunteer at shelters and rescues with her and sort of fell in love with it. I actually don't know if I'd be here today if that didn't happen, because I feel like it was sort of magic once I started to see like how special dogs were. But anyway, so I graduated with computer science in 2004, started working for a consulting company, and I worked for like Wall Street Journal and Food Network and
Wow.
a lot of big companies, a lot of big projects. I ended up becoming a manager. But after about 5 years, I was working 70, 80 hours a week, which I don't mind doing, but I was sort of like, what can I do to actually help people? So we went away to dog training school, started Instinct, and within 6 months, it was like super busy. We got a little facility and built that up over 5 years to about $1 million in revenue, got a bigger facility. So we did that. And then we just really wanted to start scaling. Myself and Sarah also did our master's degree in animal behavior. So in addition to like the hands-on, we really wanted to understand the science behind things. And because AI and data is a really big thing for us, and I'll talk about that later. And then we sort of started growing through franchising. So now, we have those locations, and it's been a wild ride. We do see about 4,000 new clients a year that we work with. And like looking at our data, and I'll talk about our behavioral health assessment data or Legend report data, we have actually 10,000 submissions to this behavioral health assessment, which it's quite elaborate because it collects up to 800 pieces of data on every dog, and the questions change based on the answers you give. So there's like up to 200 subsections. So that's where we're at today. So we have like 30,000 people in our online school, which is mostly free courses, but now starting to offer so we can help people not in Instinct locations to sort of have our hands-on experience, because we are very experienced, and I think we're quite good at what we do. Combining that hands-on experience with giving people data and insights to sort of drive the advice that we're giving and help people understand their dog better is really where we're moving into. And that's where AI has been like a real game changer for us in the direction we're heading.
I love that. Yeah, I was going to ask, when you first started Instinct, what was the main differentiator between you guys and other dog behavior and training offers? Because certainly there are a lot in each area. And how has that differentiator evolved over time? It sounds like data is now a big part of that.
Data is now a big part of it. I think now it's over 10,000 lessons a year. I think it's over 30,000 nights of boarding a year, because we have locations. Think about that. It's 30,000 nights of boarding. So you're talking about 60,000 meals and 90,000 walks. Like, it's just the amount that you have to do, and to do that at a quality that we care about. So I would say, like, in terms of like how we work with owners is really for us is like dogs are family. And I really think it's about meeting people where they're at and then really targeting advice based on research and evidence, the data and the research side of things, and how are we actually using that. And I can't tell you how many dogs we see now that come in for a behavior consult, and when we talk with them and we go through their health assessment, how many dogs that come to us for a consult and we're like, this isn't a training problem. Like, the reason why your 9-month-old dog is suddenly peeing everywhere is probably something like a UTI. Or an example I always give is like, there was a consult a little while back, and it was a woman on the Upper East Side. She had a Cavalier King Charles who went to Central Park every day, and all of a sudden didn't want to put their harness on and go outside. So they were like, I need help putting the harness on and going outside. And I was like, I'm suspicious of a 7-year-old dog changing that suddenly. I said, I'll help you with that. Sure, we can work on that, but you need to see your vet. And by the 3rd session, we didn't make much progress. And I had actually said, like, I don't feel comfortable continuing with this until you see a vet. And we found out the dog had an ear infection. She let me know the dog had an ear infection, antibiotics. 3 days later, the dog was going to the park. So we could have saved money. I think it's hard for owners to sort of connect the dots. And that's the type of the data that we're starting to see now. So I think that's really how we differentiate ourselves. And in the world of dog training too, it can be a very judgy world, and people have really strong opinions about like methodologies and
positive reinforcement. Yeah.
We actually started off as balance trainers. We actually went into our master's degree to sort of like look at research to sort of back that up. And the more we looked at it, and when we started looking at the dogs, that sort of evolved. So
yeah, me and my husband were now all positive because we read a lot of research as well. And there's like misconceptions, like you need to give them treats 50,000 times before they'll change their behavior. But in our experience, it hasn't been true. Positive training has been really, really impactful in a very short period of time.
And I think that's the other differentiator too, is like, I'm in no place to judge people, because not only did I use that equipment on my dog, people paid me to give them that advice. And 3 years, 4 years into Instinct's journey, we made that switch. And it was one of the hardest things because our networks changed. And then we had to explain to owners. So we did like free courses for owners. This is why we're doing it. If you still want to do that, we'll help you. But it was a really challenging journey, but it was one of the most important things we did.
We just thought balance training, that's what's common here in our area, that or negative reinforcement. We just didn't know any better. By the time we got our second puppy, we were like, wait, how can we do this better? And then that's when we started reading the evidence around it. And we were like, oh my gosh, what have we been doing? So then we tried the positive approach, but it was incredibly hard to find like a positive reinforcement oriented dog trainer. So we actually like digging into the research, understanding what is the state of the art, and then trying it out ourselves as practitioners. So we kind of applied that same philosophy we have around tech and AI, and we applied it to behavioral training, and it's paid off amazing. Like, it's just transformed the relationship, I think, with our dogs, and we couldn't be happier just from the perspective of dog parents.
That makes me so happy, because we're in the process of building like a portal/app that allows people to get these data insights. What we're noticing is two things. I think one is like, it's hard for people to find like quality help, and there's no regulation in dog training, right? You're kind of throwing a dart and hoping that it works. And then even if you do find someone, it's sort of like, can they do it at scale? Can they help people? And the cost of dog training is so expensive because good dog trainers, they have a lot of education. That's where we're really hoping AI is going to help. And we really hope we can sort of scale and help a lot more people that way.
The crowdsourced data piece is incredibly valuable as well, because we'd often go on Reddit and just be like, is this normal for a Samoyed at 6 months old? We just didn't know. So like Reddit was our primary source of information, believe it or not, for our specific breed, for this specific age range. Like, is this behavior normal? We just don't know anyone else who have Samoyeds in that age range. And so we just don't even know what is normal.
Is your dog very vocal?
Oh my gosh, one of them is vocal all day long.
Yeah, very. Because the Samoyeds we train in, there's a Samoyed that we could hear him coming from like 3 blocks away because he'd be so excited to come in. And it's funny when we get those puppies, like, yeah, there's a lot of work on reinforcing, not barking, because like they're so opinionated and everything, so loud. And I love Samoyeds. Very, very cool dogs.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk about the AI piece and the data piece more.
Yeah.
Are you using generative AI, or are you using more traditional machine learning methods?
For a company of our size, like, even though that sounds big, most of that revenue goes to paying people who are doing all of the work. So finding dollars for research and development can sometimes be challenging. And 3 years ago, we launched the behavioral health assessment. Sarah and I had just finished our graduate degree, and we put that together and we said, like, let's just harvest data for the next few years. And I was watching AI and I'm like, I'm pretty sure in a few years, it's going to write code for us. Let's just harvest data. And now we have like 10,000 submissions. So our statistical power is obscene. I don't even know how much similar data exists out there, especially with behavior problems. So I think for us, like, where we first started was just like using it to write scripts to get all of the data together. Like, that just massive lift of, we have all this data. It's kind of in some different spots or different tables. I think people underestimate how big of a lift that can be. And so using AI to sort of help us do that, I think, was really helpful. There's sort of, if you think about the projects, like the one big project is the data analysis, and really we're a ChatGPT, and I definitely use the O1 Pro model right now, where it's really helpful. It's like, hey, if we want to look at, like, for example, the number of meals per day that your dog eats, and like, is this at all related to an instance of human directed bite behavior?
Interesting. Wow.
And when we did it, dogs who are fed once in the evening are significantly more likely to have a human directed dog bite. So that really jumped out of us at the data. So it's like, your dog's probably just hangry all day. And so it's like, what statistical test do we need to run? So we say, hey, we have this type of data, whether it's binary or whether it's numeric or whether it's whatever. And I can read statistics, but knowing which test to actually run, it's perfect. It tells you which test you need to run and then writes the Python code to run the test for you and get the results.
So
right?
You're actually paying $200 per month for O1 Pro?
Yes.
So how is your impression so far compared to the normal 4.0?
I think it's really good. I think especially on the coding challenges, like even the other day, like in our portal and app where we use a lot of generative AI for coding. And so like we had an issue with third-party cookies and how our front and back end were set up, and our developer was stuck for 3 days and couldn't figure it out. And we sat down with O1 Pro, gave it the code, and within 2 hours, it fixed it.
That's amazing. Wow. Would you actually say O1 Pro is worth it for business owners that are trying to grow their business? They have limited technical resources, but they're trying to innovate. And
I think if you're using generative AI to help with code, I would say it's probably worth it because we've used it multiple times. It seems really good at reasoning for like math and figuring out statistical tests and stuff. We just started this 4 or 5 months, or probably about 6 months ago. And right now, like we barely run our thumb over the surface because right now it's a lot of statistical tests and looking at relationships between data. And we have over 200 insights and we've barely looked at anything. Then also, can we get into building machine learning and predictive models to say, hey, based on these factors, can we predict how likely it is your dog is going to bite a human, be leash reactive, have separation
almost
anxiety?
Like a risk score. Like
a risk score.
This is why your dog should go into behavioral training because
That's
we're
right.
detecting this level of risk. Yeah.
That's right. So that's what we're developing now, is bringing that to the forefront for people. So you don't just have to rely on our expertise, also having the data to sort of back it up. So here's the research that shows if your dog has had past orthopedic issues, your dog is 60% more likely to have a human-directed bite because like they're just grumpy, like they're sore. And so I think really helping owners understand that, I think is like really going to be powerful. So on the data side and on the code generation side, I think like that's really where it's making a big difference for us right now. And then we are also too, like even with the statistical analysis, because we get the analysis done and then we call an OpenAI API and get it to summarize the findings for us in human language. So that's really nice. And then the final step of that's going to be in our final version of our legend report, which is like the risk assessments and everything. It's going to have a little legend and it's going to say if the insight is data-backed, research-backed, or experience-backed.
Interesting. I love that. I love how you're blending all three too, because each one is really important.
Totally. Like there's some things that we see all the time, but sometimes that is valuable.
And the things where all three line up, then those you can say you have much higher confidence in, and you can break down exactly the reasons. And I love that because it's that level of transparency for the owners as well, because the industry, for those of you who don't have dogs, the industry is very like opaque. Like, you don't really know much of anything. And so you kind of just believe the person that you've hired to train your dog. You kind of believe their assessment, but there could be other factors as well, that maybe that person just isn't up to date on the latest research, or maybe they haven't worked with that particular breed very often. And so I love how you're complementing all the areas. There's that human intuition piece, as well as the data piece, as well as the evidence-based piece.
Yeah.
It's really not common at all in this industry. Like it definitely stood out to us, like coming from tech and then into the world of dog training. It is very expensive. You kind of just go off of reviews or word of mouth. There's nothing much else to go off of, you know? And it's very stressful because like you don't want to put your puppies in a negative, stressful situation that could have long-term consequences. And I also noticed kind of a trend in many of the examples you gave where there were health problems that were leading to different types of behaviors. And it's funny because we're learning those parallels in ourselves as humans. Like, your physical health impacts all of these mental, psychological, and emotional factors.
Yeah, like even things like allergies, past dental issues. Yeah, like pretty much like any of those health, like if your dog has had past health issues, it just, the risk does rise. It doesn't mean every dog who's had broken leg is going to bite a human, but like the difference between dogs who've had past orthopedic issues and not, there's a significant difference between how many of those have a human-directed bite. There's a lot of research coming out now about like when you should spay and neuter a dog.
Oh my gosh, there's such conflicting opinions we hear. Yeah.
Yep. From a very top level, we have to go into the data more, but we're definitely seeing, like, especially in males, there does seem to be a relationship between spaying. And I'm not telling people don't go out and not neuter your dog. I think really where the conversation is around is really at what age. I think getting into our data a little bit more and looking at like maybe we should let them develop a little bit more fully before we castrate them.
That's what we did. Yeah, and are you thinking of collaborating with research institutions? What does that roadmap look like?
Yeah, definitely. Sarah and I both graduated from Hunter College at the City University of New York, and we're going to be working with their animal behavior department because they're going to be getting access to some of our data as well to start like looking at this. And then I'm hoping, I'm a little bit connected to a computer science university here where I graduated from, and I'm kind of seeing if I can lure both of them into that, especially when we get into some of the more machine learning type stuff. So I think there's some really interesting research. But yes, we are definitely going to be going down that path and sort of sharing some of our data with like researchers as well, because it's a very rich source of data.
Yeah, I love that. And all the things that we're going to discover about our beloved pets now that you are able to collect this data.
Yeah.
I also love that for the owners that you help, you can kind of close the loop with data. So they can come in from a training program, you measure their data afterwards, measure it over time, and like actually track the success rates of the training program, right? And then if there's deviations over time, look back at what was normal, like what exactly changed, what are the top causes for those changes that you've noticed across all of your data. The ability to kind of close the loop with the data, I think is really compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can also get into reinforcement learning as well, because then we can start looking at what interventions are we recommending. Did these people actually go and see a veterinary behaviorist? So if you had a dog with like really bad separation anxiety, did medication really help them? So we have like a huge subset of dogs who are really good candidates for behavior medication. It makes a massive difference. And there's other dogs where not so much. So like, where is it moving the needle? Where is it not? And that's going to be like iteration 2, I think, is more on the reinforcement learning side. Need to find some more dollars, I think, before I get into that. But I'm really hopeful that that's going to be something that's going to be really valuable for people.
Awesome. Love it. I wanted to talk a little bit about your entrepreneur journey, because a lot of people listening to this are interested in starting a business one day or going out on their own in some way. What advice do you have for folks interested in starting out and doing their own thing? Especially in your case, you made a pretty huge transition from traditional tech world over into behavioral health for dogs. And so what was that like? What were some of the biggest challenges? What's your top advice for future entrepreneurs out there?
Think back to when we jumped and started Instinct, and I'm 43 now, so I was 28, I think, when we started Instinct. So I remember Sarah and I, we just left and we said, okay, we're just going to live on ramen noodles and wine for the next 2 or 3 years or 4 years. It might have been a little bit longer than that. But when I think back to those early days, it was probably some of the happier years of my life, just because like I felt like I was doing something that was aligned with my values and what I wanted to do. Didn't care about the money. There's lots of decisions I could have made that would have been much better from a financial side. I made them because like I want to grow the product, the service, the impact that we're having. The impact for me sort of trumps everything else. And it doesn't mean money doesn't matter. But from my perspective, I think if you find something that you feel like is worth trying, I just don't think you'll regret trying and if it doesn't work. So I think that that's number one. Number two, it's going to be 10 times harder than you can ever imagine. Building Instinct, there's been lots of ups and downs. The pandemic was an utter nightmare, especially for those of us with a facility. I think between us and New Jersey, we had to refund $250,000 in a week and a half because everyone canceled their travel, right? So we have these big facilities. It was like spring break time. Frankly, we almost went under. And then even now, I would say dealing with things like inflation. Inflation's really tough from like a business perspective. Wage inflation and cost of things have really gone up. And so there's always these ups and downs. But I think the thing that sort of keeps me grounded is like, why are you doing this? And if you don't know why you're doing it, if you're motivated by money, great, then that's why you're doing it. I just think it's really important to be connected with that why. Know that it's going to be really hard. You're going to feel like failure sometimes. I think that's the other part that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. And then when you get out of those situations and you look back, you're like, just had to deal with what was in front of me. So I think like my big message for people is to be kind to yourself. You are going to have to work your ass off. You'll work way harder than you probably do for anyone else, but it's worth it if you know the why.
My first startup, it took 7 years. I also did it, by the way, with my husband. It took 7 years, like 7 years. Most days I felt I was failing, second guessing myself. We had just come out of college. We're trying to figure it out on the fly. But it took that timeline just to get somewhere with my first company. And obviously I look back and I'm like, okay, if I didn't make all of these mistakes, probably could have done it faster. But that's part of the process of being an entrepreneur. Your first one is going to be incredibly messy, incredibly inefficient. We lived in a living room as a married couple for a long time because we weren't paying ourselves much of anything. While most of our friends who are working at big tech companies are making hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. But it was 100% worth it. Looking back, I can't imagine doing something else. And so it is really important to go after it, not have regrets, but also be realistic about what it's going to be like. It's going to be really hard, probably not going to pay yourself much, if at all, in the first couple of years. And it's going to take a long time. It's not normal to just have a success in 6 months. And I feel like there's a lot of impatience right now. Everyone wants to say they're an entrepreneur, but the reality of it is like years of grind and uncertainty, not knowing where things are going to go.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, it will take a piece of you. There's a piece of you that you are going to have to sacrifice. And you can say whether it's with your family or your friends or those types of things. And that's okay. It's a trade-off. But yeah, I think I do like that. When we start to scale Instinct was 2018. So and sometimes I'm like, oh, like we should be further by now. But then sometimes you have to take a step back and be like, no, it's okay. We're doing what we need to do. We're working through it. And it's a long-term, I don't really plan to retire at any time. I could do this until I'm 75. So I'm good. I'm good for the long-term game.
And that's the beautiful thing of when you find something that truly aligns with your value. You really could do it for a very long period of time, even through the hard days.
Yes.
I'd love to also talk about what other ways you're using AI or ChatGPT in your business. So we've talked about kind of the data piece, harvesting that data and then analyzing it statistically. Any other ways that you're using it, either for content creation, marketing, business, anything like that?
Yeah, well, we actually had a pretty popular podcast and kind of got off after the birth of her child and stuff, it kind of slowed it down, but we're actually kicking it back off again in the new year. So Sarah, she's just like a tremendous writer. So if you read her newsletters or anything that she writes, like they're just tremendous. And when people on her team, they were like, I wish I could write like Sarah. And I was like, hold on a second. So what we did was we wrote a script to scrape all of her blogs. We just created a custom GPT with it, but then also created a custom prompt to sound like her. And so I feel like that's been really interesting. The second place too, I think where it's also been really helpful is where, because about 6 months ago, we started to do a trial with our team where we got them all ChatGPT paid accounts, especially our in-home people, because they're going in-home to in-home to in-home. In their car on the way home, they would just talk to ChatGPT,
Oh, that's one of my favorite use cases.
Yep. Yeah. They vomit it out
and
vent, and here's all the stuff, and like give me the, the key insights or things I should put into every client gets a Trello board. And so like it tells them which cards to create for their Trello board. So when they get back,
I love that. So they're actually productive. So like right when it's top of mind after they're leaving a client's home, they can just like say everything to ChatGPT. It'll organize it, format it, right?
Yes. And I would like in a future phase, like once it does that, since it can put it in the format of Trello cards, we really should just be using the API to stick it into the Trello, into the Trello board, get a little workflow automation there, which we've done a lot of. It's just, prioritization, but at least for now that's working. I think the other place where it helps too is with different clients. If I'm working with like a high-powered attorney from like New York City versus someone who's a Broadway star or a celebrity, how they perceive the information that I'm giving them is going to be different. So when we write our proposals or when we're writing steps, it's like, help me frame this for someone who is energetic and excited and like wants to learn stuff. Let's make the content more relevant to them. Whereas someone's a lot more like black and white and to the point and don't care about all of the research underneath it, then like write it more bluntly. And we do that just to make stuff more accessible and easier to read for the people there. Yeah, so I would say like those are probably the biggest things. And I will say too, our team, we tried to kill email a number of years ago and we've largely succeeded because that's why we use Trello boards, because I think email was the soul-sucking thing for most of our trainers because you're just always in email. So we moved to a Trello board where they can put in like little missions and people can upload video and you keep your conversation, right on point. But even like our front desk people and our operations people, because they do a lot of email, especially with dogs in our care, they use ChatGPT a lot, again, just to make sure that formatting and everything sounds good. We're really excited about when we start doing these insights using some form of generative AI. We want to actually use generative AI to make the dog like a cartoon character, like superhero.
Cool, yeah.
Right? So it's like every dog's a legend. So like your dog's a legend and it's like the legend report. How can we make stuff accessible? So like, can we create like a little 4 or 5 panel summary that's like a little comic book that like you can give to your kids?
I love that. Yeah, you can definitely do that with like Leonardo.ai. They have like this cool feature, a character reference, where you can upload a picture of a dog or a person and it'll create images with that character. So
yeah, well, that's my question. That's the hardest thing, is the consistent character thing. So Leonardo, you think is probably?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think like that's sort of like another area, again, just making things accessible. Because right now we're going to be rolling out like any virtual sessions, like we should be getting the transcripts and summarizing them and everything, but we're actually be piloting having our trainers actually wear microphones as well during their sessions.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So like, it's just so hopefully, and I mean, we need it to get both people, but we can actually have the entire conversation, because then again, you can have that for notes or for reference, and that's sort of the other place where we want to use it as well.
That's what we did when we had our in-home sessions. We just record it and then have the notes afterwards, because otherwise, like it can be like a 2-hour session sometimes, and like there's a lot of like nuance and how they move or what they do, where their hands are, and like I can't remember that. There's no way I'm going to remember all that. So.
No. Yeah. So I think that's, I mean, overall, I mean, it's been a total game changer, especially if you're like a little bit technically inclined. I sort of feel like for us, it's sort of our sweet spot, because we're like a traditional service business, but now we're sort of pivoting into like this more tech play, because we have a lot of the hands-on experience, but we have a small tech team. The productivity gains from using AI in all of these areas, it's utterly game changing. Like, I think that's the time we're living in right now is just rank with opportunity.
Yeah. I feel the same way. Yeah, that's a good note to close off on the
Yeah.
podcast. For other small business owners out there, what is your advice for them who are maybe they're just getting started with AI? They don't know where to start with ChatGPT in terms of introducing it to their business. Any tips for business owners out there in terms of
Yeah.
how to adopt it?
I think you just have to get started. Pick something and try. Follow people like you for sure. And then just sort of dive in and get started. I think that's like the main thing. And then I would also say too, if you're looking at getting tech help and that sort of thing, I would definitely lean towards people who have experience using AI, because I sort of feel like if you're getting help from an agency or technology, if they're not using AI at this point, you're going to be paying a lot more for stuff that can be done a lot faster, probably with like a quality person who still knows all the things. But if you put a rocket booster on them, there's a lot more that can be done. So I would say things are looking very bright from that perspective. But yeah, get started, get using, and don't be afraid.
Love it. Awesome. And where can folks find out more about Instinct?
Yeah, you can follow us on Instagram. We were under Instinct Dog Training and Instinct Dog Training NYC, and all of our locations have different ones. You can follow me on TikTok. You can search for Brian Burton and dogs. I'll definitely come up. We have a TikTok account there as well. But yeah, you can follow us on Instagram or go to instinctdogtraining.com or online schools there or blog. And yeah, hopefully you'll find something helpful.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much for joining me, Brian.
Thank you.